So number one is dial in the quality of your food. Number two, dial in your fat macro. 3, properly manage your electrolytes. Number 4, find organs and bones. Number 5, dial in your water source. 6, optimize your eating time. 7, optimizing omega-3 fatty acids. What's going on, carnivores? Happy 2020. Thanks for tuning in this video. The 7 keys to crushing the keto carnivore diet in 2020 are going to be awesome. I've got 7 of them. I've been on the keto carnivore diet now for about 14 months. I started as a carnivore. I was ketogenic before that. I sort of transitioned into the carnivore diet, and throughout that progression, I've made a lot of adjustments and optimizations, and I think you're gonna find these 7 keys really valuable. So number 1 is dial in the quality of your food. When you go carnivore and you really focus in on just animal foods and get rid of all the plant molecules, you are eating a lot of animal foods, and you wanna think about the quality of your food. The quality of your eggs can be substantially different from what you get at Whole Foods versus getting directly from a farmer. The quality of beef, whether you buy it direct from a company like White Oak Pastures, where I just came from a few weeks ago, or you're buying it from your local farmers market farmers, it really does depend on the quality of how they raise the animals, how the animals experience exposure to sunlight, what kind of soil they're eating, what is the soil growing out of. So all of that makes a difference. And as we know, and as I'm writing in my book that's coming out in a week, about a week now, we talk about hormones and pesticides and other things that get transferred through the growth of the soil into the food. So dial in the quality of your food. If you want to learn more, check out the book. There's a link in the description here. I'm going to be plugging that a bit here as we get closer to the launch, but I'm going to explain in very great detail how to do a lot of these keys. So if you really want more depth, go there and I can tell you more about it in the text that I've written out. Number 2, dial in your fat macro. So when you're on the carnivore diet, you really want to think about being ketogenic. Ketogenic means being about 70, maybe 80% fat or more. I think most people, especially if you're more athletic like myself, are going to be in that 25% protein, 75% fat. But you really want to get your macros dialed. This is going to help with your hormones. It's going to help with how you overall feel in terms of your energy levels and just being sustained with energy. It also is going to help you to get high quality fat for gut issues and getting quality vitamins. Number 3, properly manage your electrolytes. So when you're in a ketogenic diet, it's by nature naturally diuretic, meaning it's allowing you to flush out more urine in your body, and your body is just kind of flushing things. You're also eating a lot less carbohydrates. When you have a lower carbohydrate intake of food, and you're not eating as many processed foods that are loaded with sodium, you're not getting nearly as much sodium or water in your diet. And a big thing for me that I've experienced in my body over the last 6 months or so is when I tweak my sodium intake levels. There's a small percentage of people in the population who do not do well at higher levels of sodium. That's probably 5, maybe 10% of people who might get hypertension, higher blood pressure as they increase their levels of sodium. But generally speaking, you need a lot of sodium in your diet. We're talking 4 to 8 grams a day when you're in ketogenic and you're on a carnivore diet. So salt your food liberally. And as long as you feel good, and as long as you're not in that sort of category of a high risk of high blood pressure, you're probably gonna do really well. Personally, I find if I do that, I get a lot less cramping and I feel much better. Also, if you're transitioning into a ketogenic diet, this is one of the best ways to curb the keto flu, which can last for up to a week for some people, but can be much shorter if you do your electrolytes right. Key number 4, find organs and bones. In the carnivore diet, in the carnivore community, there is this sort of sub-diet that they call the lion diet. I'm not a fan of it. I know Michaela Peterson's promoting it. I'm sure it's helping a lot of people. But when we talk about a complete nose to tail nutrient profile, we talk about eating a carnivore diet all the way from head to toe. We want to get nutrients that are unique in the body. And the muscle meat is not going to contain certain critical B vitamins. It's not going to have nearly as much vitamin C. You're not going to get nearly as much vitamin A. And there are a few organs that I want to recommend. So the 2 organs that I consistently consume that I highly recommend are liver and kidney. And I prefer them in beef, but lamb and pork are also certainly fine. Even chicken and duck can be great for those things as well. But the goal here is you want to mix it up a bit. You don't want to be eating steaks 24/7, 365. You want to be eating liver probably once or twice a week, 3 to 4 ounces, depending on the size of your body mass and how much you need in terms of your nutrient necessities. You want to be eating kidney probably more like 4 or 5 days a week. It's a lot less in vitamin A load, and it's also going to give you a lot of great unique nutritional profiles and help you, as a side note, with allergies if you have an issue with allergies. So big fan of kidney. It's not quite as tasty. I personally like to saute it with ghee butter and some salt, and I find if I sear it and do that, it tends to taste a little bit more palatable for me. For liver, I make jerky. I've got a video on how to do that. I also will eat it purely raw. There's a lot of water-soluble vitamin B, vitamin C in there, and I find that liver for me is fine just as it is, completely raw. With all food, make sure that you're being careful with the sourcing. If you know where you're getting it, obviously then you can, and you know it's fresh, then you can be a little bit more courageous with the raw kick if you want. And bones. If you aren't getting dairy in your diet, which I highly recommend you consider taking out, especially if you're new to carnivore and you want to just see how deep and how powerful you can go with the diet, dairy can be largely triggering for a lot of people. Personally, I see it flare up my acne and my skin. It causes blemishes. I feel bloating. I get gassy. I do not feel nearly as clear-headed and as optimal when I consume dairy. So I highly recommend you consider nixing out dairy for at least 30 to 45 days and then maybe reintroducing parts of it. So when you're not getting dairy, calcium becomes a challenge. And you want to think about spring water, which has some calcium, but then eggshells. I typically eat 1 to a half an eggshell a day. And I also am looking at different options of bone meal, ground up bones, and eating those. I don't get a lot of seafood, which is another option you can get from like sardines, the small bones in the fish, or potentially just chewing on some bones from animals as well. I just don't get that in my diet. But calcium you want to be mindful of, as well as some of the minerals like boron and manganese that are found largely in the animal's bones and in things like potentially like eggshells. So consider that as well as the organs. Which brings me to key number 5. It's a nice segue. Dial in your water source. Earlier this year, I started out with a Brita plastic water filter. After hanging out with Carnivore MD and just hanging out with Paul and learning about water and plastic, I got rid of plastic from pretty much everything that I consume as far as water goes. Even BPA-free containers can leach into your water source, so you want to be mindful of that. I upgraded to a Berkey. It's a stainless steel container. It does have a water spigot, but for the most part, the water sits in a stainless steel compartment so that the water is more clean. And then I went a step further a few months later and went to purely just mineral water. And I find that I like drinking actually spring water, correction, not mineral water, but spring water, because it has a lot of the trace minerals in it. It has calcium, it has it has some magnesium in there, it has potassium in there, it has a bit of sodium and some minerals, but basically it gives you some of these things that balance you out. Also has bicarbonate, which is another interesting topic that I've talked with Paul about and heard him talk about as far as needing that in your diet to kind of balance out some of the pH and things going on there. So I think it's really valuable to get spring water. It's an unfiltered source from the spring. That's how they get it. So it doesn't actually strip the minerals, where the Berkey is very clean and there's no plastic, but then you're removing literally everything from the water, or something like reverse osmosis. So consider dialing in your water source as something like mineral water or spring water. And you can find sources through findaspring.com. See if you can dial that in. Number 6, optimize your eating times. I have played around with this for the last several years of my life. I got exposed to intermittent fasting when I was following David Asprey and his Bulletproof brand back in like 2014. And then Tim Ferriss and Peter Attia kind of influenced me on it as well. And then more recently, I got into chronotyping with Dr. Michael Bruce and his book, The Power of When, which also I kind of picked up through Dave Asprey and Jim Quick. The idea here is that we all have different things. Nothing is probably going to work perfectly for everyone. And so depending on what you want, how you want to live your life, you're going to want to optimize things. Some people are early birds, some people are night owls. I personally have most recently taken the approach of a lion chronotype, which is a chronotype of one of 4 that Dr. Bruce explains in the Power of When book, which you can go, I believe, to thepowerofwhen.com or even take the quiz at thepowerofwhenquiz.com and learn what type of chronotype you are. And he'll tell you a bit about when you should eat, when it's optimal for your hormones, when you might want to exercise, when you want to wake up, when you want to go to bed. For me, I find it kind of nice to model this because it helps me decide when I want to eat. I personally used to, up until the last few months, never eat breakfast. Just skip breakfast, do intermittent fasting. There's a whole slew of information about the health benefits of fasting and intermittent fasting. And I certainly think that can be quite beneficial. There was a period of time where I went with 1 meal a day, and that was an interesting experiment as well. What I recommend for most people who are metabolically healthy is that you consider 2 to 3 meals a day. I do probably 2 to 3 meals. I mix it up. About half the week I eat 2 meals a day. The other half of the week I eat 3 meals a day. So I usually do a big breakfast, and that's usually about half of my calories. And then I do a medium-sized lunch or a pretty substantial lunch with no dinner. So if I do a medium-sized lunch, then I probably will work later in terms of exercise. I'll work out later in the afternoon, and I'll do a meal after my workout to kind of give myself some mTOR activation and to give myself some protein and fat and energy after I've done the exercise. It's gonna fluctuate based on your goals, but I do recommend that you think about your eating windows and look into intermittent fasting. One thing you probably do wanna do is get rid of chronic snacking, get rid of and tighten up the window of eating that you do have throughout the day. There are a lot of studies out there that show longevity, increased cognitive performance, when you can get into a metabolically flexible state of running on ketones and being in ketosis, and also running an intermittent fasting. So I recommend it. I think it's beneficial. I think you want to play with it and see what works best for you, because certainly I think meal times is one of those things you could do you could literally write a whole book on it. I mean, there's been books written on it, and it really does impact your productivity and how you work. So I've played with just having breakfast and only lunch, no dinner, and that saves you a lot of time in the evening. But what I've found is that if I do that, usually what I want to do is I want to work out at lunchtime and then have a huge lunch, and then I'm kind of lagging throughout the second half of my day. And so I find that I don't get quite as much productivity when I function that way. And so I've kind of shifted back to more like a breakfast that's pretty hearty around 7 in the morning. I usually get up around 5:30, and then I have a light lunch that's between noon and 2 p.m., usually somewhere in there, depending on when I have conference calls and meetings with my teams. And then I have an evening meal, and I try to keep that fairly minimal, maybe a third to a quarter of my daily caloric intake, because having heavy meals at night for me has affected my sleep in a negative way. And so I try to do that, and that seems to work really well for me. I like having the midday meal as a sort of reward of pleasure and balance for me to kind of break up the day a bit. It's an activity that before I just kind of skip. And yes, I think I could probably get leaner and fitter and lower body fat percentage if I did tighten up the window, but I think I lose some productivity and I'm not as effective that way. So number 7, consider optimizing omega-3 fatty acids. When you are carnivore, you are getting rid of a lot of the omega-6 fatty acids in your diet, which is a good thing. Although omega-6 fatty acids aren't innately bad, you want to balance the ratio. You want to get it closer to a 1-to-1 ratio. Now, there's not direct evidence that says you have to be 1-to-1, but a lot of people out there think that this is the optimal range, or even like a 4-to-1, 3-to-1 ratio, where you have 3 times the amount of omega-6 fats coming into your body as you do omega-3s. The benefit of optimizing omega-3s, and what I've found, is that it helps with joint stiffness, maybe long-standing sort of joint issues. It certainly can help with inflammation if you have that in your body, and you just have to be careful. Now, grass-fed beef of really high quality will have some EPA and DHA omega-3 fatty acids, but it's not gonna have nearly as much as seafood. The catch with seafood is a lot of seafood is contaminated due to the pollution in the ocean. So you want to think about smaller fish like sardines and salmon roe, which are fish eggs. But the catch with that is they can be in containers of aluminum, which are lined with plastic. So you're getting plastic, and they can be oxidized if you're buying fish oil, even higher quality. And oxidation, although there's no studies that have linked it to disease, it can be an issue. So it's one of those nuanced things. I think getting a high quality fatty acid might be a good thing for most people, and the pros would outweigh the cons. For me, I find my knees get a little stiff if I don't have a good balance there, and also just getting high quality salmon where you can find it. Those are the 7 keys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I wanted to whip it up. I think these are really valuable. I think if you follow these and you apply these into your carnivore and ketogenic regimen, you're gonna find tremendous benefits, and you're gonna slingshot yourself into 2020. And as always, I want you guys to get healthy, optimal, and really benefit from all of that. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it to the end here, hit that like button, subscribe. Throw me a comment. What do you think is the top key for you from these? Or maybe there's one I missed that you really benefit from, and I will see you on the next video.